In this exercise, we are going to start with this sketch, and in the end, we will get this result, and we are going to apply gradient to each and every element in this illustration. File, place, exercise 19, check template, and then place. First thing, I'm going to draw the sky and the ground, so we're gonna need the rectangle tool. Gonna set the fill to none, set the stroke to 5 points, and I'm gonna start from here, click and drag like this, and we create a rectangle the size of the artboard, and I'm gonna place the cursor right here, click and drag, and this rectangle is going to be the ground. I move it down using the arrows like this. Now go back to selection tool. I'm going to select this rectangle and I'm going to apply a gradient to this rectangle. So I click on gradient tool. I make sure the fill is in front and not the stroke. The fill is in front. And using the gradient tool, all I have to do is click here, linear gradient, and now we have a linear gradient going from white to black. I'm gonna change the direction of the gradient. I'm gonna place the cursor right here, click and drag like this. And if you want this slider to be perfectly vertical, all I have to do is press shift, and now it's perfectly vertical like this. I'm gonna let go, double click here. This is set to white. We're not gonna change that. We're gonna double click here and we're gonna change the color from black to blue, just like this. Now I'm gonna select this rectangle. I don't necessarily have to go back to selection tool and then select. I can, using the gradient tool, press Control and I can access the selection tool. I can click here, select, let go of Control. Now we're back with the gradient tool, and to apply gradient tool I can click here just like we did with the sky, or I can open the gradient window and click right here, click to activate. Of course, make sure the fill is in front and not the stroke. Click to activate, and now we have another gradient right here. I'm gonna change the angle from 0 to 90 degrees like this. I'm gonna change the color, double click here. I'm gonna set this to a dark green. Double click here, I'm gonna set this to a lighter shade of green, this shade. And now selection tool, I'm gonna go back, make sure I select both of them, and now change the stroke from black to none. Now we have the sky and the ground. I'm gonna select both of them, object, hide, selection. And now I'm gonna start drawing the trees. I'm gonna start with this one, like this. We're gonna need the pen tool, fill none, stroke black, size 5 points, so we can see it clearly. Click here, click and drag, anchor, click here, click and drag like this, click here and go back to the first point, click and drag like this, and now we close the path. This part of course doesn't matter because it's going to be covered with the other part. So we started with the trunk. I'm gonna draw the other part now. Gonna place the cursor right here, click and drag like this, 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 and go to the first point and click and drag, and now we close the path. Of course, if there's anything wrong, I can press Control and click on the point. I can move it if I want to, like this. I can change the handles just by using the direct selection tool. I'm gonna leave it like this, and I'm gonna move to the next tree. Start from here, click and drag, click anchor, click and drag like this, anchor, click, and click and drag like this. Now I'm gonna draw this part. Okay, I'm gonna start from here, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag like this, 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 click and drag here, 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 click and drag slightly here, and click and drag right here. I can press space and I can move the point, put it where it needs to be, like this. Gonna click and drag slightly like this, click and drag slightly like this, and now I'm gonna close the path, click. I can move to the next tree now. Next tree, gonna click here, click and drag slightly like this, click here. I'm gonna create a straight point, click with no dragging, click and click. I'm gonna draw this part, click and drag like this, 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 click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, Alt. I'm gonna change the size of this handle and go here, click and drag like this, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and now I can close here, click and drag like this. Of course, I can press Control and access the selection tool, or go to selection tool, and I can make sure everything is fine. If there is anything that needs correction, I can correct it by moving the points and the handles. I think everything looks fine. Slightly move this. Move it a little bit to the right. I think everything looks fine now. gonna zoom out. Now we finished drawing the 3 trees. Now I'm gonna apply a gradient to each part of these trees, starting with this part. Go to gradient tool. I'm gonna apply a gradient, linear gradient, like this. I'm gonna open the gradient window, change the angle to 90% like this. This is what we want. I'm gonna change this color to a dark shade of brown and this color to light shade of brown like this. And V selection tool. I'm gonna select this part now. I'm gonna do the same thing. Gradient tool. I'm gonna open the gradient window and I'm gonna apply another type of gradient, which is the radial gradient. I can do that by clicking here or by clicking here, radial gradient. And now as you see, we have a radial gradient. I'm gonna double click on this color and change it to this shade of green. Double click this color. I'm gonna choose a dark shade of green, just like this. Selection tool. I'm gonna select both of these parts now, and I'm gonna change the stroke from black to none. Now I want to apply the same appearance that this tree has to this tree and this tree. I'm gonna start with the trunk of both of these trees, and all I have to do is select the eyedropper tool and I click here, and just like that I stole the appearance of this trunk right here. I'm gonna go to gradient tool. Both of these are selected and I'm gonna change the angle from 0 to 90. Now it's exactly the same as this part. I'm gonna press selection tool. I'm gonna select this part, shift and select this part, and I'm going to steal this appearance, apply it to both this part and this part. Same thing, eyedropper tool, and all I have to do is click here, and just like that I applied the same appearance. I'm gonna go to gradient tool, go back to gradient tool, make sure the two parts are still selected. I'm gonna start with this one. I'm gonna make the circle a little bit bigger. I'm gonna change the size, the shape like this, using this point, and using this point I'm gonna rotate it like this. I'm gonna do the same thing here. Go here, I can use this to change the size, I can use this to change the shape, and once I see this cursor, once the cursor changes, this means I can rotate. I can click and drag and I can rotate it just like this. So I think now we're done with drawing the trees. All we have to do now is draw this rainbow right here. For this I'm gonna zoom out like this. I'm gonna select the pen tool, fill, I'm gonna set it to none, black for the stroke. I'm gonna make it very thick, like 100 points. I'm gonna click here, click and drag right here. Make sure the path is inside the rainbow, like exactly in the center, and I'm gonna click here, hit escape. I'm gonna change the size. I'm gonna push the cursor right here. I'm gonna increase it up to, let's say, 380. direct selection tool. I'm gonna make some adjustments like this to make sure it matches the sketch. Using the arrows I can move like this. I think this looks good. Now I need to apply a gradient that has the 7 colors of the rainbow to this stroke. So I'm gonna go to gradient tool. I'm gonna open the gradient window. We're gonna need this, and make sure the fill is in front, not the stroke. The fill is in front. The fill is in front right here. If I click here, now the stroke is in front. So the fill is in front, and I'm going to apply a gradient, linear gradient, by clicking here or here, like this. No, I didn't select the part. I have to select it, select the part, and then linear gradient like this. I applied a gradient. Now here we have 2 colors. I'm gonna add 5 more colors. So I put the cursor right here. I click here, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we have 7 points in total, like this. I'm gonna click on enter gradient editing mode. Now I have, see the slider right here. I'm gonna change the colors. I'm gonna change this to red. I'm gonna change this to yellow. Change this to green. Change this to blue. Change this to a dark shade of blue. Of course, I can change the colors from here or from here. Double click here. I'm gonna change the color to pink, and this color right here, I'm gonna change it to this shade of red. Now, as you see, we have all colors of the rainbow. I'll make sure there's the same distance between all of the points, like this. Same distance. 7 colors, the colors of the rainbow. Now I'm gonna go to selection tool. I have this selected. If you notice here in the appearance, we have rainbow for the fill and black for the stroke. I'm gonna flip now. I'm gonna swap fill and stroke just like this, and now I'm going to change the fill from black to none. I go back to the gradient window. I go back to gradient tool. Now, very important, I make sure I put the stroke in front. Notice here there's an option called stroke, but we can't access it. I'm gonna put the stroke in front by clicking here or by clicking here. Now the stroke is in front, and now we can access this option, stroke. Right now it's set to apply gradient within stroke. I'm gonna change this from here to this option, apply gradient across stroke. Click, and now we get exactly the result we wanted. One last thing I'm gonna do, gonna click on this color, red, and I'm gonna change the opacity to 80%. Gonna click on this red and change the opacity from 100 to 80%, so the colors on the edges. Gonna close the gradient window, object, and now I'm gonna click here, show all, bring back the sky and the ground. And now the exercise is finished. You go do the same, and don't forget to save.